So now that I've got the first 4 out of the way, here's part 3 and also the final part in this series that I'm doing where I look at the WWF games on the PlayStation 1 console. So here it is, Smackdown 1 and Smackdown 2, Know Your Role. I hope you enjoy. By the time the year 2000 came around, WWF had won the Monday Night Wars against WCW. WWF at the time were really the top dogs when it came to wrestling. Of course, with it being a new year, it also came with a new game. This one would be hugely different from the previous WWF games I've covered in part 1 and part 2. As I said in the last video, WWF Attitude would be Acclaim's last attempt at making a WWF game. They would, however, continue making the Extreme Championship Wrestling games, but by the time they'd come out they would already look incredibly outdated by comparison to the other wrestling games coming out at that time. WWF fans felt robbed by WWF Attitude on the PS1, especially when the Nintendo 64 players were being treated to the likes of WrestleMania 2000. That came out only a couple of months after Attitude in 1999. I mean, just look at the comparison here. WrestleMania 2000 and even No Mercy that would come out a year later were great entries and are still widely considered to be the best wrestling games to date. So what would be the next WWF game to come out on the PlayStation 1? PlayStation 1 users would finally get their own exclusive wrestling game for the system called Smackdown. Our Intercontinental Champion at the time of this game's release was Kurt Angle, and our WWF Champion at the time was the game himself, Triple H. Let's get into this. Smackdown would be released in March of 2000, this time being developed by Yuke's, who had already worked on a whole wrestling game series by this point. For those of you who may not know, the game gets its name from the TV series the company has ran since 1999. Smackdown, which actually came from one of The Rock's catchphrases.
Mary had a little lamb. Well, I tell you what, piss on the lamb, piss on Mary, and piss on...
Back to Yuke's for a minute. They got their start in 1995 by developing the Shin Nippon Pro Wrestling series. We'd know it better here by the name of Power Move Pro Wrestling. I believe we only got one Power Move Pro Wrestling game here, but Japan were treated to a whole series of these games. When I was a kid, I only knew 3 wrestling organisations, them being ECW, WCW, and of course, WWF. But it wouldn't be until many years later I'd find out about New Japan Pro Wrestling, which these games are based on, and I never really had a reason to play them until now, and I can't believe how great these games actually play. I have no idea why they only released one of these games here, which is a bit of a shame, because the later games are all in Japanese, which I cannot read sadly. Nonetheless though, I enjoyed playing these for the making of this video. I'd have felt robbed playing Warzone and Attitude back when they originally released while being completely oblivious to these games existing at the time. The company THQ were the publishers for Smackdown. They published the WrestleMania 2000 game for the Nintendo 64, so we know we're in good hands in that department. So, how does Smackdown play? Like a fucking dream. No more sluggish controls, no more input and a million buttons to pull off a single grapple move. Yuke's transferred their already brilliant game engine and put the full WWF roster for the time in it, and it works a treat. It has a nice pace and is complemented brilliantly by its great controls. Now to pull off moves you just hold a directional button and tap circle. Easy as that, keeping the free-flowing feel of the game going. X button pulls off kicks and punches while the triangle button makes your wrestler run. What's the deal with finishers, you may be wondering? Gone are the bars that drain while doing damage to your opponent and are now replaced with momentum bars that fill with each move you successfully pull off. Once you have filled the bar, it'll empty and you'll notice you've been gifted a little green ball in your bar. That's a finisher you've just scored. Once in the prime position, that allows your wrestler to do their finisher. Wait for the beautiful Smackdown logo to appear next to your wrestler's name and simply tap L1. Boom, it's game over. With how great the gameplay is, there's only one thing that annoys me, and I remember it driving me insane when I first played it as a youngster, and that is the lock-on system. When there are more than 2 wrestlers in the ring, it can sometimes get a bit confusing who your player is locked onto. You can manually choose who you're locked onto by pressing R2, but you can get hit by another wrestler and sometimes the game will decide if you're locked onto the wrestler that just hit you or the one you just previously locked onto manually. It can make matches like the Royal Rumble infuriating at times, but all in with that aside, it's a solid wrestling game experience. I remember I couldn't wait to experience all the different match types included. If you navigate to the exhibition mode on this neat and nicely laid out menu system, you can choose a variety of different matches. You have a lot of the same matches from the previous game, Attitude, but they also included a few new ones that are the I Quit match, which sees you and your opponent fight it out until one of you cannot take it anymore. They also included Special Referee, which if you ask me isn't really a match, it's more of a stipulation added to a match to make it more intense. Can't knock it though, there's nothing better than screwing someone over with a fast count or not even making the count at all. But the match type for me that I had the most fun with was the hardcore match. You can fight all over the arena in this one and also interact with objects in the area that you're fighting in. You can blow up the cooker by throwing your opponent into it in the kitchen area, or even set the car alarms off in the parking lot. I do however remember being slightly gutted that they didn't include ladder matches or even the Hell in a Cell, which would have been two of my favourite match types as a kid at the time. But that aside, this game is jam-packed with match types that'll keep you wanting to play for ages. Let's take a look at the game's career mode now. You start out by picking a wrestler of your choosing from this impressively sized roster. Remember what I said in part 2 with wrestling games always representing the previous year from the game's initial release? So even though this game came out in 2000, you're really getting what the WWF had to offer in 1999 when it comes to its talent to choose from. Once selected, you're brought to the events card showing all the matches on that show. You can play or skip any match you want. When the match is over, it says at the bottom how well the audience received the match. It's very basic to be fair. One thing I've never understood is halfway through a show it'll skip to a cutscene with a random wrestler either cutting a promo or walking about backstage. Never seems to be the wrestler you're playing as either. Yeah, I get they're trying to replicate the real life product, but it seems a bit filler once you keep seeing the same cutscenes over and over again. It's really a never ending experience, this career mode. Every now and then the game will prompt you to change wrestler to keep things fresh. They had a good system on how a wrestler would gain title shots in this. It was based on a ranking system of how many wins and losses that particular wrestler had under their belt. The likes of Triple H, The Rock, Stone Cold etc. were right up at the top, but the likes of Mark Henry and Hardcore Holly would be further down the list. If you wanted a created wrestler to have a chance at the belt, you'd have to take them through 10 years worth of pre-season mode. Who the hell has time for that? And that's just for them to get on the main card. You can bash out a year fairly quickly in the season mode. There is only one event per month in this, unlike the real life product itself having 4 episodes of Raw, 4 episodes of Smackdown and 1 pay-per-view a month. All in, it's an enjoyable experience. Some things don't make much sense though. I was playing through season mode as X-Pac and when I got to the Royal Rumble he got eliminated. Luckily the game lets you choose someone else who enters. I thought it would be a good idea to stick to the theme of DX and go Mr. Ass when he entered. I eliminated Stone Cold at the end to win the Rumble. So do you think I got my title shot at WrestleMania? Bullshit, I never. The event before WrestleMania, I deliberately lost the tag titles to Mankind and The Rock so nothing would get in my way of that title shot. But apparently they take this damn ranking system too seriously. So apart from having a fun experience, most people play season modes to get the chance to unlock wrestlers to play as. Doesn't really work that way in this though. You do unlock wrestlers but only parts, which then you have to make in the create a wrestler mode. Seems a bit shitty to go through a whole year to only get parts to create Ivory at the end of it. While on the subject, let's talk about the creative side of the game. I did mention in part 2 that I remember feeling slightly robbed when I would eventually play Attitude and see how in depth the creative mode was compared to the Smackdown games which I was so used to. You can still create pay-per-views with somewhat the same formula, but the actual customization has been stripped back. You can't customize the ring or entrance or lights, it's literally you pick a name for the pay-per-view, add a selection of matches and your pay-per-view will be rated at the end of it. Much like Create a Pay-per-View, Create a Wrestler is fairly bare in comparison to Attitude. Just a lot of presets that you can mix and match till you find something you like. I remember making this THQ guy as a kid and thinking I was the shit. One thing I did think was cool back in the day, and still do actually, is making alternative costumes for wrestlers. Seeing as they're made to look the way they did at the time with the correct attire, you can go in and add tights to Triple H if you preferred that attire, or even go ahead and give The Rock a black shirt to represent his look from being the corporate champion at the tail end of 1998 and the beginning of 1999. All in though, it's nothing to boast about. But what it lacked in these modes, it totally made up for with its gameplay, and that to me is what counts the most. It is no surprise that this game was praised highly by players and critics. It really gave PlayStation 1 players something to boast about to Nintendo 64 players while they were balls deep in WrestleMania 2000. It may have not been as highly praised as WrestleMania 2000, but it was being said that it was the best wrestling game for the PlayStation 1 to date at the time. It done that well with sales, it received a platinum version. All in, I think it's an absolute classic. I'll never forget the day I got my hands on this game. A little 8-year-old me woke up early one morning to go through to the living room to see my dad playing this before letting me know I got it. I sat weeks on end playing this and I already couldn't wait for the next game in the series. But it wouldn't be long until we get the next game actually. In fact, landing that exact same year in 2000, we'll get the new game. So let's get into it. Here it is, Smackdown 2, Know Your Role. I was blown away by the first Smackdown game, thinking it would never get any better than that. How naive I was. I remember watching an episode of Smackdown and boom, I seen this advert playing. Holy shit, another Smackdown game in the same year? Didn't us wrestling fans get a treat in 2000? 2 wrestling games in the same year was, and still is, mind-blowing to me. Released in November of 2000, developed by Ukes and published by THQ. Seeing as this plays almost identical to the previous game, I won't go into detail about gameplay, more the improvements. The game's tagline, Know Your Role, comes from one of The Rock's greatest catchphrases at the time.
Know your role and shut your mouth!
Our WWF Intercontinental Champion at the time of this game's release was Billy Gunn, who funnily enough won it on an episode of SmackDown that aired the day this game actually came out, and our WWF Champion at the time was Kurt Angle. Now onto the main menu. You'll notice it's incredibly different from the previous game, looking a bit more slick. The game has its usual match types you'd expect, but they've jam-packed a lot of new kinds in this also. These including ladder matches. These can be won incredibly quickly though. Also, no matter what belt is on the line, it's always the European belt displayed above the ring. Casket matches make their debut, a nice addition, but I didn't play much of these as a kid. Back are the hardcore matches, with upgraded backstage areas to fight in. The one new addition though that got everyone talking was the inclusion of the Hell in a Cell match. It looked nothing like the real Hell in a Cell cage we'd see on their TV shows, but it was amazing for its time. It was a great feeling reliving those classic Hell in a Cell moments by throwing an opponent off the cell, or even through it. They've upped their game with the create modes in this, going back to how it was in Attitude but a lot more in depth. When creating a superstar, going to each section you want to customise will bring up 2 options, one being standard, which will have pre-existing models to choose from, but by going into the advanced option brings up a lot of customisation for you to make what suits you. They've also included create a taunt mode in this, that you can assign to your created wrestler. I can't remember using this back in the day, but I got a good laugh making some of this up for the video though. The customisation doesn't stop there. You can assign managers to wrestlers and also create stables. The customisation is definitely a strong point for this game and highly improved from the previous one. Now with a new wrestling game comes a new season mode. I will say this, I remember when this game first came out I couldn't put it down. Played through the season mode endlessly. They've introduced a whole host of new storylines, cutscenes as well, which even though much like the first game, most of them don't impact you or even have any meaning to the character that you're playing as. It's meant to reflect what the real life product was like on TV, which I understand. There's now cutscenes where you can get jumped backstage, and it then cuts to a little in-game fight you can have. It does a good job making it as true to the real life product as possible. But going back and playing it now, I feel they kind of fucked it. You wanna know how? Every single match. I mean every single goddamn match you have to sit and watch these stupid battle meters play out. I really don't know how I persevered through this as a youngster because now it feels completely unplayable to me. I even remember me and my brother making our own fun from it by guessing who'd win each match. That's how bad it was. What was wrong with the previous game where you'd press skip and it would automatically show you who won and who lost and quickly move on to the next one, making the game have a nice free-flowing pace to it? Why did they do it in this fashion? The battle meters are just as bad as the loading screens too. When transitioning into a cutscene, you get this loading screen. This is real time for how long it takes. I mean, they sometimes make it bearable by having a picture of Trish Stratus appear, but who wants to look at Perry Saturn like this for an uncomfortable amount of time? They really dropped the ball with this, I feel. There was nothing wrong with the formula of the season mode in the previous game, so why fuck it like this? What makes it worse is sometimes you're not even on the card to fight at that event, but you still have to sit through all of this for nothing. I really have no idea how I managed to play through this so much when I was younger. It really is a shame because I was looking forward to sit and play in this game's story mode for a week or two for this video, but it's really off-putting now. If anyone knows of a mod or something to sort this, let me know please. I kind of think they knew this would have pissed people off because normally you unlock new content by playing the season mode, which you can do in this, but I remember unlocking some characters while playing slobber knocker matches. Once I beat about 20 other competitors, an unlockable character would appear, and once defeated, they would become a playable character. A much quicker and easier way to unlock some superstars without the pain of sitting through shitty battle meters and ball-achingly long loading screens. I just really can't wrap my head around this. Also, why is Ken Shamrock advertised as a playable character on the back of the box? Look, his name is right there. Also, while looking at the back of the box, why is The Undertaker dressed in the same attire as the last game? He is in his American Badass attire in the actual game. Look, I know, you're probably thinking I'm ripping this game a new hole, but the good does heavily outweigh the bad. The only bad is how much piss arsing about you do in season mode, that's it. Everything outside of that is top class. The game has an outstanding roster featuring 54 superstars, and a further 13 unlockable superstars, bringing the total to 67, and that's not including the amount of created superstars you can make. Also, there has been a good visual upgrade with the inclusion of more detailed arenas, and the Titantrons looking more how they'd look on the real TV episodes of each respected show. Maybe I'll do a more in-depth review one day because it's far too much to go through, and plus I don't want the video to drag on too much. I thought it was a good and easy idea for this series to include 2 games in each episode, seeing as there are 6 WWF games in total for the PS1, but I completely forgot how big this game actually was for its kind. I feel it'll come across overshadowed by the previous game and I don't think that's fair. But on that note, it's no wonder the game was received very well on its release, praised highly for everything apart from its story mode. But what I think people mean by this though, is the loading times and battle meters. Because without them it would be a solid experience and much better than the previous game's attempt at a season mode. It received platinum status and was the highest selling sports combat title on the PlayStation, which is huge when you think about it, and it still currently sits with a high rating on Metacritic. If you haven't already, I'd say definitely give it a bash for yourself. It really is a classic, to be fair. And that brings us to the end of this series that I'm doing. I really enjoyed going back to play some of these games, you know, obviously some better than the others, but it's good to see the games that I loved as a youngster still hold up well to this day. Anyways, as always, if you haven't already, subscribe to my channel to be kept up to date with future content I upload, and I'll see you in the next one. Bye.